Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Stacy Varghese, and I'm the Associate Director in the Office of Advancement at St. John's University. Today, we have Jessica Robinson and Denise Dragos, who will discuss cybersecurity and consciously secure living. Some housekeeping rules before we begin. If you have a question, please submit it on the bottom right to panelists and hosts, and they will be answered throughout the fireside. As a reminder, please make sure to keep yourself on mute. Lastly, a recording of today's session will be emailed to you after the presentation. Now, I am excited to introduce our speakers. Jessica Robinson is CEO of PurePoint International, helping CEOs and C-level leaders bridge the gap among data security, cyber risk, and privacy. PurePoint International provides cybersecurity consulting and training for financial services, insurance, and other middle-market global companies with startup $350 million in revenue. Jessica's vision to create a different kind of security company has earned the company an award for international affairs and women's security from JC's Philippines, New York chapter. Denise Dragos is a full-time instructor in the Cybersecurity Systems program at St. John's University. She completed 3 years as an adjunct professor before joining the faculty of the College of Professional Studies. She formerly worked as a manager in the New York City office of KPMG's U.S. Forensic Advisory Services. She specializes in network security, information assurance, incident response, and digital forensics. She is also a licensed New York State private investigator. Denise retired from the New York City Police Department after 20 years of service as a detective second grade. She was assigned to the Computer Crime Squad for 11 years, where she was responsible for investigating all computer-based crimes, including computer intrusions, identity theft, online fraud, theft of intellectual property, and crimes against children on the internet. Welcome, Jessica and Denise. I will hand the webinar controls over to you now.
Good morning, everybody. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the event here, and thank you for the great introductions. I don't think there's more to expand upon that. You did such a good job. Jessica, would you like to say anything else before we get started?
No, I think that was great. So,
great.
Thank you.
And,
thank you very much, Stacey, for that great introduction. Yeah,
I guess we can just jump straight into the topics at hand, which is cybersecurity and what's going on today. It's certainly a very interesting time. In the world, in general, and it has direct effects on how we do business and what our work day looks like. It's a tremendous shift across the board. So I guess the first question, Jessica, I'd like to maybe get into is what are the cybersecurity trends that you're noticing now as we are heading into 2021?
Yeah, so, this has been a challenging year for leaders. So whether you're a cybersecurity leader or you are a business leader. And it's been interesting to not only work with different companies that we work with at PurePoint, but also to see what's been going on with some of the other companies that my peers also are a part of. And so I would say that though this has been a challenging year, I think that the team and that when it comes to cybersecurity, people are still very much focused on finding the right talent, very much focused on how and where they're finding talent to come in and support their business, and thinking about how they are planning for the future as well. I would say that this has also been of time in thinking about and planning differently around cybersecurity. It's been really challenging in thinking about competing priorities when it comes to a budget. And so if an organization is thinking about how does their team work remotely, and they're also thinking about, maybe the real estate of their office differently now that their team isn't there. They're thinking about they're looking at their profits differently depending on how their profits have changed. And all of this impacts the cybersecurity budget. And so, which has ripple effects in terms of different decisions that impact the team, but also decisions that impact what do we prioritize within a budget. And it's tough, and it's really tough. And I apologize for being late, but I was just on a call with a leader of an organization, and these are some of the real concerns that people are going through. And so the other thing that I would say is that one of the things that is also very clear is that so much has changed this year in just thinking about the speed of technology. And for people to be working remotely the way that they are now, that's something that was maybe expected more by 2025. But to see that happen now, one can't help but also think about what does the speed of technology look like, and what do organizations really need to be thinking about in terms of detection and protection around cybersecurity, even just in the next couple of years that we maybe don't have within our organization now. And I'll just give you an example of one thing. So we all use passwords on a day-to-day basis. But, by 2030, I'm pretty confident in saying that we'll get to a point where we won't be using passwords as much. We will have something else that we'll be using, because there's still just so much challenge with people remembering passwords. And so could that speed up? Could we get to a point by maybe 2025 that passwords won't be something that will be used as much by organizations? And if they are, it'll kind of be, that will be a significant kind of identifier in terms of how mature your security is within the organization, whether you're still using that or not. And so I think that the speed of how leaders are thinking about how they're protecting their environment is changing very much. And I think that those are some interesting trends to think about, particularly just with everything that's been going on. There was this interesting survey that was done by the World Economic Forum just on the COVID challenges alone. And 350 different risk experts said that cybersecurity and data fraud occurring within their workplace due to sustained shift in working patterns is something that continues to be a top concern. And that's not a surprise, but, that continues to be top of mind as countries around the world are continuing to go back into, isolation with their teams. And if we're not committed working from home versus, a possible hybrid method, or someone even going in one day a week if they chose to do that. And so I think, as we continue to go into 2021 and think about how this will continue to impact the workplace, at least through July 1st of next year, are the top things that I'm seeing as trends right now.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of companies offer working at home already through July, midway through the year, July 2021, and this was several months ago. I've also seen companies now offering full-time positions, permanent positions, working remote, where that was not an option earlier. So I think the real estate market is, going to be completely transformed by this, with companies that have had, many floors and very expensive Midtown Manhattan offices. I think they're rethinking what it means to have, a workforce, centralized. It's very transformative with what's going on, as we see. And it was 2020 was ready or not, here we come, remote working, it's here, change it ready.
Right, exactly.
So, it's, we've all been forced to transition into remote working. Many people were not familiar with tools like Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams, a year ago. And now it's just, we're spending hours and hours a day on these platforms. People aren't even making normal phone calls as much. You're defaulting to video conferencing. So it's a different world from a year ago. Absolutely. So as far as, now in our newly forming reality, has there been any difference, or what have you seen as far as threats and attack trends in business? Yeah,
it's, you just, rightly brought up what was a big focus at the beginning of the year, which was the video communications platforms, and how that has has been a significant challenge for business. And, the thing is, everything that happened with Zoom, it's really hard when you tell particularly larger organizations that that really are, committed to enforcing this, to say you cannot use Zoom, and you must use Microsoft Teams. Well, to your point, Teams is relatively new. So, if people are moving from Skype to Teams, or, you're really getting used to using this. And I think that happened really in 2018, 2019, now into 2020, kind of this shift of businesses using these different tools is, it can be challenging when there's so much change going on. And also when so many partners are using Zoom, it can be hard to eliminate that as a tool for people to use. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, I mean, in April, there were 500,000 stolen Zoom passwords that were on the dark web. And so this presented a very real risk for businesses where they had to draw the line, and even in the state of New York, the Attorney General got involved and stated that the Department of Education couldn't use Zoom, which was a very big deal when you start to think about students and how students are learning. And then the FBI put out a warning saying that Zoom was a concern. So this was a very big deal for businesses and for students alike, and for education systems, or education for school districts. Another thing that we saw was in 2020 there was a significant increase, obviously with everyone. There are 316 million people in America alone that started to either work from home or go to school from home. And so that also increased the number of remote desktop protocol concerns. So meaning for anyone who's using a desktop, or some people that I know took their desktops home. Of course, they had their laptops home, but they took their desktops home as well. But this increased the number of brute force remote desk protocol attacks that went on. So they went from about 100,000 to 150,000 per day in January and February, to soaring to nearly 1 million per day at the beginning of March. And so, thinking about how a security team and an IT team can not only put technical controls in place to be able to support these types of changes, but then also think about how do they engage their team in training was a really big deal. And then also, if you just think about the different types of malicious files that were in, that are on the, web, as someone's going to click or download something, or thinking about email and just sending malicious files, or receiving an email and just clicking and opening something, the different ways that also has increased, these email versus web attack vectors. And of course, we see the biggest increase in the biggest area around email, because that's much more targeted, and you can just send someone an email and have, a link there for someone to click on that can engage them in business email compromise or, phishing. And from there, get someone to click on something where they're quickly putting in their ID and password, and they're just doing it so quickly because they have so many distractions, so many things going on, that not everyone is taking the time to stop and really see, is this something I should be doing? And it's, and with these types of things happening, and these things happening at an increased speed, and definitely what we've seen with different organizations that we've worked with, it only adds to the stress of everything that's going on. And so it makes it for a really, it just increases the challenge of what's going on in the workplace when this occurs. So I would say those are probably some of the biggest things that we've seen. I think that this has also allowed an opportunity, though, for people to increase their focus around cloud security and any challenges that people have, that they have not fully focused on in regards to cloud security, and really ensuring that they're doing everything that they can there. I know that there's been a couple of incidents there. And then, though I mentioned business email compromise and phishing, I think without a doubt, social engineering overall, just seeing more of those types of attacks. We saw the Israeli Defense Agency, the military, they had an incident earlier this year of social engineering that took place, as well as Twitter. And if some of you guys maybe saw that attack with Twitter, that was back in July, and attackers were able to get a hold of an employee's credentials, which then allowed them to gain access to a particular tool within Twitter that they then were able to hack and gain control and access over accounts like Bill Gates and Barack Obama's and Elon Musk, and start tweeting out cryptocurrency links. So, but they still had to get those credentials in the first place. So, it's, to continue to train our teams is something that is extremely important to help mitigate these types of attacks from happening. So.
Oh, yeah, great response. So just to clarify for the audience, social engineering is, I do hear an echo also. So social engineering, though, is when basically a threat actor uses some type of technique to trick a person into divulging information that they wouldn't normally release to somebody. Usually it's just people are the weakest link. You have technology, which is, set in stone, this rule set. It does what it's supposed to do generally. But, people are trusting. And if somebody can, earn trust, by, pretending to be a boss in need, they call up with this urgent situation, people generally want to help people. So, if they can call somebody on the phone and trick them into giving information, that's what happens. That's social engineering. And even a phishing email, for example, is considered social engineering. They're tricking you to divulge information that you wouldn't normally give out to somebody. So that's a huge, huge vulnerability that does fall back to user training, as you mentioned, though, and user awareness. You touched on some really interesting topics on the technical side as well, with RDP and phishing as well, because those seem to be the largest threat vectors for this big looming cyber attack that companies are facing. Ransomware. We've all heard of ransomware, not maybe understanding what it means exactly, but that's when somebody or a threat actor gets a program installed on your network, and it starts encrypting all of your data. And basically, it's using an extortion. You'll get a message: we have all your files. All of your files are encrypted, and unless you pay a certain amount, usually in some cryptocurrency amount of bitcoins or something, you're not going to get your files back. And remote desktop protocol, has been a huge threat vector, that and phishing as well, that we've seen. And it's been exacerbated because of all of the network machines, enterprise machines that have been dispersed, out into the private sector now. So, we've always had a situation where there's a BOD policy, which is bring your own device. So now basically it's not just bring your own device, it's also a BYO, bring your own office. So it is a new reality with all of these people working from home. And, you had enterprise level security, which is a challenge on a normal day, when you have your office, you have a perimeter, you have physical security, but now you have people working remotely. It's definitely changed the landscape, for sure. And you did mention cloud, the cloud as well. The cloud has been growing in use for a long time, for many years, and it's not just the cloud. What even is the cloud? People aren't sure, lay people necessarily. But basically everything from Office 365, that's a software as a service, which is cloud-based. That's, you're not necessarily downloading, all of the traditional Office programs to your local computer. You're running things in your browser, and things are based in the cloud. Even, certain web-based email services are basically cloud-based services. Because you're not running Outlook locally necessarily. You may be, but you're not necessarily relegated to that now. And of course, you have much more advanced cloud-based services, but everything is running, online. And so that's for enterprise level where that's more prevalent. It's certainly an issue that needs to be examined nowadays. So I guess we could deep dive a little bit, particularly in various industries, because things have affected different industries differently. With COVID and with people having to stay home and socially distance. Each industry has, had to deal with this and cope with it differently. What are your thoughts on various industries? Jessica, I lost your audio. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. So, the thing that jumps out right away is healthcare, and just the scene, what we've seen the past couple of years are definitely attacks, particularly ransomware attacks and phishing attacks, then compromise attacks against healthcare organizations and hospitals. But I would say this year that has definitely increased, and the thing is that these organizations, though they carry so much data and so much personally identifiable data, personal identifiable health data, that these organizations still very much are targets because of the type of legacy technology that they have. And to see that have a huge tick this year is not surprising, but it definitely is a concern. And it's a concern for a couple of things. One, not just because of the pandemic that's been going on, but two, everything that has gone on has had also a significant impact on doctors' offices across the country. And so there are some doctors' offices that have had to close down, believe it or not. Depending on the size of their practice, they have been significantly impacted, like a lot of small businesses. And the type of information that they have and that they hold, if they have had to close their office a couple times a week, or let's say the doctor has had to be redistributed inside of a medical system and is not maybe in their office as much, but now is supporting in the hospital to be able to support with larger concerns, because their skill sets allow them to do that, then that means still that this data that may not be protected the way that it should be is sitting where people aren't even going to necessarily be aware if someone is accessing this data, changing this data, taking this data, copying this data. So it just brings in different concerns. And if that's the case, not only digitally, but also these offices, of course, have physical locations. So it's also ensuring that there's the right security in place for the physical locations as well, particularly in some places if there aren't people that are there as often. So I would say that that's definitely been a significant concern and a significant trend. I would say another area is supply chain. And this, we can think about supply chain. It can be organization that literally that's kind of the work that they do, is thinking about supply chain and supporting their clients in that way. But if we also just think about supply chain as part of a business, and that's supply chain is really thinking about how we secure the supply chain is a big deal, because again, a lot of this isn't just digital, it's also physical security. And when we think about authentication, using badge access to get into certain locations, all of a sudden when you have a lot of people working from home, you may realize, some organizations where this is significant for a significant enabler of their business, or it's something that's significant in terms of the work that they do, particularly if they have warehouses, then thinking about authentication and how people do that can be really challenging in a work from home environment, and maybe realizing that their technology isn't up to date. And really supportive of them being able to have a true work from home environment, or even for the security team or the IT team to be able to have a visibility into what is going on in these locations the way that they would like to, because of that. So if they're working from home, but even for some reason if people have to go into work because they're critical workers and are essential employees, then just this gap of information and knowledge that's there has been a challenge. And so it's been interesting to see how organizations have also navigated that to be able to continue to serve their client base. And I would say those have been pretty significant. I mean, I would say that without a doubt, those that are handling personally identifiable information, I've seen personally just within my own community and organizations that we've supported or that we've seen, if you're in insurance, if you're in financial services, if you're an accounting organization, there has been an increase of attacks there as well. And I don't think that that's really a surprise, but just to say that, hey, that these are kind of more targeted industries because of the type of data that they hold. These are also more regulated industries, that this is happening, and that we are continuing to see that as a concern.
Yeah, certainly. It's very, very relevant. I think so many industries have been affected, over this last year. Just for another example, the real estate industry, and obviously just not the real estate industry from market trends, with reconsidering of what it means to need an office, as we mentioned earlier, but the actual logistical day-to-day way that they have to do business. With social distancing, they're not able to do open houses. They're not able to have huge tours of various properties. Even just regular real estate agents, your local real estate agents, they've had to go virtual as well. You'll see them, they need to adapt with the times, and they're also working remotely. You'll see virtual house tours. Everything, you could buy a house online now without ever looking at it. The auto industry has been shifting, slowly, with being able to order a car online and just getting it dropped off at your house, kind of like Amazon to the degree of cars. But even purchasing homes and real estate has transformed as well. And a lot of the people in that industry, it hadn't necessarily been as reliant on technology yet. On the back end, they have different multiple listing services and different online interfaces as far as for listing sales on different websites. But now their actual day-to-day sales job has gone virtual. So that's just another example of how everything, literally everything has changed because of the transformative year that we've had in 2020. So enterprises have resources. They have very large IT. They have IT departments. Sometimes with hundreds or thousands of employees just working in IT support for our large corporations, and they've been preparing with incident response plans as required for different regulations, and disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans. So this idea, especially since after 9/11, that was transformative as it was so much, especially here in New York, but that changed the way businesses operated and the contingencies that they had to plan for to stay alive in crazy circumstances, because the world is just the way it is nowadays. When you deal with smaller businesses, though, they may not have been prepared for something like what we've been facing. What do you think about that? How has 2020 been different for small businesses when it comes to cybersecurity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the way that it's been different is how they are thinking about their business from a security perspective. I think there's no doubt that there are a lot of small business owners that are just kind of like, hey, security is important, but it's not a priority for me right now, particularly if I'm thinking about how do I make payroll or how do I increase my sales and profitability. And that's, and I can definitely understand that. But one of the things that's definitely changing for small businesses is depending on the type of business they have and who it is that they want to be working with, like who their ideal clients are, their ideal clients are asking them to go through the vendor risk process. And so when they have to go through the vendor risk process, they are now confronted with the fact that they have to look at security in order to be able to get the client that they want so that they can increase their profits and they can pay payroll. And so that has probably been one of the biggest shifts with small businesses this year. Now, obviously, we have businesses, that would be like a B2B business. So that's a big thing there. But it's B2C, it's a little bit different, but nonetheless, what is very clear is that what consumers and customers and clients are looking for is they're looking to place their money in an area where people are thinking about security and privacy. And so if you're an organization where you are taking in particularly information from your consumers, there is an expectation that that information is going to be kept secure. And so there are more business leaders small business owners that are being confronted with that reality. But I can also tell you that even if people are still saying, no, I'm still too small, that doesn't impact me. If you, and again, it's different with the different type of businesses that you are. If you're, if you have a retail front, what you're going to be focused on right now is how do we keep our teams healthy and safe in a pandemic? And that's your priority. And so that's what you're thinking about in terms of physical security and health and safety protocol. So really thinking about how that is in place for you. If you have a retail storefront, whether you're serving food or not, or people are coming in to purchase, needed supplies or whatever, that's your priority. However, if you're a business that has now had to go online and you're now hosting all of these different conversations online, there's no doubt that those Zoom bombing is something that happened. We got a lot of notice and visibility at the beginning of the year. This is still happening. And so people are also being confronted with the fact that they have to create safe online spaces for people. And if they don't do that impacts their reputation. And so, and I have seen places and been a part of, webinars where this has happened. And so now these individuals are being confronted with security in a way that they didn't think that they would have to face it or confront it or, follow up with people that were on the call and explain, what they're going to do to ensure that doesn't happen again. And so I find that it doesn't matter where you are as a small business owner, if you have a retail storefront, if you are having to put your business online, if you're taking in data from your clients, if you are receiving questionnaires that you have to complete from your ideal client around vendor risk and security and to ensure that you aren't going to be a liability for your ideal client. People are being confronted with security in different ways that they absolutely have to confront and deal with. And I think that has been the biggest change for small businesses this year. They can't just sit back anymore and say security doesn't impact me or it's not a priority or it's not a place I'm going to make an investment. In order to increase the profitability of their business, they're almost being forced to start to set aside a budget, even if it's $1,500, $2,500 a year, to think about security.
Yeah, the entire retail industry has changed, as everything else, as I keep repeating myself. People are expecting now to be able to do things like curbside pickup. People don't want to even walk into a store necessarily. At least, hopefully things go back to some type of normalcy. We hear the new normal, whatever that's going to be. But, hopefully we get back to something where we're just not as uptight and, health isn't as day-to-day just a huge worry, that we're not necessarily going to be needing masks and being afraid to be close to, somebody that we're not, that we don't know. But, even just implementing things like curbside pickup, because then now you need an online store. And, that sounds, but that it might not be that challenging, but it really is, because then now you're going to have to integrate things like inventory control. And then now you're dealing with the payment card industry, doing online sales. And, these are things that some companies may not have ever even, thought that they would have to get into it. And now just to survive, they're required to, they have to do this. And the food industry, we see things such as like Uber Eats and on all of these other delivery services, that people don't want to go to the store necessarily. We're all sheltering in place. There's an app for everything, and these companies, to survive, they need to adapt to be able to work in this new reality where they need to be connected. So this affects not just the big box stores or larger stores, but the mom and pop retail stores. There's an app that I use called Splice. All the local pizzerias are involved with it, and if it's not there, then they don't get that as much business necessarily. So they've had to transform the way that they do business. I have an old school pizzeria down the street from my house, which is great, but they take cash only. They're struggling to they don't know what to do. It's a old school, older family. They don't understand the technology. So there's issues there. That you need to be able to evolve with the times. So it's certainly you need to. It's certainly, it's not optional nowadays. So there was a question from one of our audience members. The question is, let's see, all right, so what steps, can an average person take to protect their personal data and information, from criminals? We'll be able to, answer that. Right now I think we've been concentrating on enterprise level and business levels, but I think we'll trickle down, and I think we'll get to that, once we, towards the end of our conversation. But you can think about that, for the time being. So, for entrepreneurs, what's one thing that every entrepreneur or business owner should be doing in COVID-19 to protect their businesses? What are your thoughts on that, Jessica?
Yeah, I would say that there needs to really be this mindset shift to understanding that security is an integral part of the business. That the time of not thinking about it as part of the business, or I want to start a business and have a business because it's the thing to do right now. I think it's something that has been popularized over the last 5 years, particularly of having a startup. But there are responsibilities that actually come with it. So one of them is thinking about security and compliance and all of these other things that aren't, that people don't maybe see as much fun, but they are an essential part of the business. And so really integrating that into your own business strategy is important. Because, here we are in 2020, which is very different from even 2000, but there's an expectation of security and privacy in whatever it is that you're doing. So yes, if you're going to go buy a slice of pizza, the expectation is that if I'm going to give you my credit card, and yes, because not everyone carries cash, so if I'm going to, give you a credit card for a $5 slice of pizza or buy 2 slices for $5, the expectation is that you're doing everything that you can and you're using the right tools to ensure that this information is going to be safe. And so I would say that's the biggest thing. The other thing, if I were to add a second thing, is just to train your team and ensure your team knows what they should be doing as well. But I think that there are so many people that, so many entrepreneurs, solopreneurs out there that I think just alone for there to be this increased awareness that there's no longer really are the days where I can have a business and not think about security. Even for people that, I talk to a lot of people, they're like, oh, I do fashion consulting or I do different things. And they're like, cybersecurity doesn't impact me. Well, the moment you decide to take, credit card information, it does impact you. The moment you're deciding I'm going to take someone's sizes or I'm going to take information about them or take photos of them because I need to have a better idea of whether they look better in this outfit or that outfit, that's a privacy issue. Once you start taking it in, and, particularly, as we start to think about different regulations that exist in the world, particularly if you're working with someone who is a European resident, and they're just happen to be visiting, or maybe you're working with them virtually. And so the way you work with people in one part of the world, if you're now working virtually, it may not be the same way that you can work with people in another part of the world, depending on the type of regulations that exist. And I find that as we continue to go virtual, as people are continuing to think about their customer base and their consumer base and expanding it to, not just the United States, but thinking outside of the United States, these are the realities that entrepreneurs have to think about.
Oh, very much so. It's not just one small world now on the internet. It is one big world on the internet. We're all interconnected, but you do need to realize that every country has their own sets of laws, and you touched on it, and that's dealing with the EU and their GDPR, which is their newest cyber privacy laws that have been implemented that protect EU citizens, but EU citizens not just in the EU, but EU citizens all over the world. Any company that does business with the EU, and it affects every company that any international company has some type of impact with that, and the amount of fines that could be levied on a company that's not compliant, even if it's a U.S. company or a company in anywhere in the world except the EU, they're still subject to having to be compliant, and the fines are astronomical, literally astronomical. So it's a lot. It's an awful lot for companies to have to deal with. So I think it's been impossible not to already kind of touch on this because it's all encompassing. But what's changed in this COVID environment that we've been living in for the last 10 months, especially with teams working from home, how has this changed us?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that's probably changed, and it happened immediately for when the transition happened and people working from home, is really thinking about how do you keep the team engaged and thinking about cybersecurity, right? How do you keep people engaged when there's so many different distractions, and people are they're homeschooling their children, and they're now working from home with their spouse who's in another room, and they're talking about things that are personal or that are confidential, but their child can hear, and and the school can hear the background of that conversation, and then you have again the spouse in the other room having other conversations, and it's just really about how do we continue to have this engaged workforce in cybersecurity, and have it be something that we can still make it fun and engaging, and not have it be kind of like this stick that's kind of coming down over the team. And it is a real challenge to be able to do that, and to make but the way we do that is still by focusing on how we connect with each other and thinking about how we can make it fun. To not always think about what are the consequences of things that if things happen that aren't going well, but think about how we can reward positive behavior. And it's a very real concern for organizations that are thinking about just how do we maintain a culture. And that also that expands beyond just cybersecurity culture, but it's an organizational culture. And one of the things that's clear is the way an organization does one thing is the way an organization does everything. And I would say that in terms of culture, and that may or may not fit, in every single case, particularly, in large organizations, because, cultures in different parts of the organizations, different locations, different parts of the world can definitely feel different, of course. But in just thinking about it that way, if an organization is thinking that way, then they're thinking, how do we maintain that culture as the team is going remote, and particularly when it comes to security. And it's definitely a challenge, but I see teams working through it, and it's been really great to see how they are thinking about how to make it fun for the team.
Oh, such a great answer. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate you sharing all of your experience with us. So we've been talking about businesses, from large enterprises down to the small businesses, mom and pop shops even. So some of the concerns that attendees have, what about themselves? What should they be doing to protect their own personal data from cyber criminals? Any suggestions for just a typical end user to follow?
Yeah. So what I would say, and this is a big thing I would say for people that are working from home, and I know that for me as well, as I've spoken to different people, one of the concerns that they've also had is around their children and how do they just keep their children safe as their children are homeschooling. And I would say that if, for all of your devices, your phones, your laptops, your, old laptops that your children are now using, your iPads, whatever they happen to be, just do ensure that you have what I would call the basics on there, that you do have some sort of device security on each of those devices, meaning there's an opportunity to lock that device. So that's the first thing. You would want to ensure that you have multi-factor authentication enabled on all of the tools and applications that you're using. A lot of people use Google Docs and Google Suite. They use Office 365, of course. They use other tools. Just ensure that you're enabling multi-factor authentication on all the tools that you're using. Slack. Those are kind of work things, but anything that you're also using personally. All of your social media, ensure that you're ensuring that for social media that you are enabling all of your security and privacy controls. The truth is that we can sit here and we can, blame a lot of social media for, the fact that they're not doing it up to protect us. But a lot of people aren't actually going on and setting their own controls so that they can actually control the amount of information that's out there about them too. So be sure that you do that for yourself and your children. The other thing that I would say is if you have a VPN or virtual private network, make sure that you're utilizing that on a day-to-day basis. And that's extremely important, not only for work. Now, probably just to even sign in for work, you're going to go through their VPN. But for your children, if they are homeschooling right now, ensure that you have a VPN at home that they can utilize as well. And then, I would say that, I'll say two additional things. So one, have a password manager, because having a password manager, I think, is just so important right now. We think about all the passwords that we have to have at work, all the passwords we have at home, and then now I can imagine that as a parent, you have probably all these tools that your child has to access, and depending on the age of that child, you are now also having to take on all those passwords to remember. So, don't just write them down someplace where a piece of paper could easily, get lost, could go in the trash, someone could come in and pick it up and now have access to all of that. Just really utilize a password manager, invest in something that is going to be useful for you and really make your life easier as a parent to be able to help support yourself and your children in this way. And then the last thing that I'll say is there's a part of our business called consciously secure living. And we have different areas of our business that we focus on this. And one of the things that I say is it's important for us to lead a consciously secure life. The world is changing so quickly. The way that we lived our life even 5 years ago, even a year ago, is very different from how we have lived our life this year and how we are going to live our life in the future. You have to be thinking holistically about your life around how you are thinking about safety and security. We're already doing that, right? People are doing that on a day-to-day basis now. When am I going to leave the apartment? How am I going to go about shopping for my food? If I am going to go into the workplace, how am I going to do that strategically so I'm safe? If my child is going to have to go into school today because this is the day they go into school, then in the physical location, then how are we going to do that in a way that's safe? People are wearing their masks, or are people going to wash their hands a certain number of times a day? All of these different things. They're going to have wipes and, they're going to have hand sanitizer. We're already doing these things, right? And thinking about how we do this from a safety and security perspective is very, very important. And ensuring that we're not just stopping there, but that we're thinking about this from the digital security, the physical security, and that we're actually doing this, and that all of the things that I just talked about, that you're doing this on a consistent basis, and you're modeling this for if you have a family, you're modeling this behavior for your family, and that your children and other people within your family, it could be a spouse, could be a roommate, could be a parent, could be a sibling, whoever it is, but that then they understand that this is behavior that they should be doing too. And so when you're saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and click on VPN before I pull out this sensitive data and start looking at it on my laptop, that's really great. And that's behavior that you would want people in your family to follow. If you're going to say, hey, I'm going to get a password manager so I can manage my password, that's really great. And now you're teaching someone else through that behavior, okay, this is really important. I should be doing that too. If you talk about to your children about what's appropriate information to share and what's appropriate information to not share, then that's really great, because that child is also learning that, which is really important, because they could be in a position where they maybe in the future inappropriately share information about themselves, their family, or a friend that they maybe shouldn't be sharing, but they didn't know not to do it. And so it's, these are habits that we absolutely have to be building like a muscle. Also because we can expect that as these privacy concerns, a lot of what's, these are security concerns, but these are privacy concerns as well. And so you really want to ensure that your children understand what it means what privacy means, and that they understand what it means to not share images and all of that as they start to get to a point where they are running and having their own social media accounts. So those would be some things that I would just share in general about how you can stay safe, but also how you can do it in a way where you can feel empowered to do it and not feel like you're the odd person out, but you're actually taking control of your life and you're saying, hey, this is important to me, and I'm going to make sure that I do this and just make it a part of my life and make it a part of my consciously secure life, as I would say, instead of unconsciously kind of responding to things and doing things that are after the fact that aren't really going to be as helpful to you or to those that you love and care about and want to protect.
Wow, thank you so much, Jessica. Those are great suggestions. Yeah, user training, even on end users, super important. And password managers, I preach the same thing. Password managers, super important, because it's not if a site is going to get hacked, it's when a site's going to get hacked eventually at some point. There's always going to be incidents down the road, and if people are using the same password on every site, well, once that one password or that single password is compromised, then they can use that to log into all your sites, because now your login is typically your email address. And then if you're using the same password on your email address, then they can get in there and start resetting all the other passwords. So just some typical well-known password managers that are available out there, things like LastPass or 1Password. All great options. A lot of the other security suites are now integrating password managers as well. And one thing I would like to add for people, if you have the ability financially, don't use your debit card on the internet, because if your debit card is out on a website, that website gets compromised and that credit card gets hit, well, if it's a debit card, that's taking money right out of your checking account. They're taking your money, as opposed to if you're using a typical credit card, then you're getting the bank's money. Once it gets investigated, you should be able to get your money back. But if that money's out of your account, you may be, have an immediate financial hardship. So use credit cards on the internet. Don't use debit cards. This is certainly something I'd like to add. I think we're wrapped up with time right now. Jessica, thank you so much for participating and sharing all of this wealth of knowledge with us. Thank you again. And Stacy,
thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, Stacy, thank you. I don't know if you want to say any closing words, Stacy. Otherwise, I think we've had a great sharing. I don't see any other questions from the audience, and I think we're about a minute over time already anyway. So.
Yep, great. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and a very special thank you to Denise and Jessica for sharing their knowledge. For their full bios, please go to stjohns.edu/CF webinars. Here you will also find a schedule of upcoming webinars and past recordings. I hope you will join us next Thursday, November 19th at 9 a.m. as we continue our networking series and learn how to have a successful virtual interview. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day.